"You'll bring trouble here," the wind seemed to whisper, but he opened the door anyway. The evening light stretched long over the open plains. The sky held that late-day gold that makes even a lonely ranch look like a memory. Dust hung quiet in the air, and the only sound was the gentle clop of hooves as a single rider approached the small homestead at the edge of the desert. His name was Elias Grant, a single father, weathered by years of work, wind, and silence. He lived with his daughter June, a quiet girl of 6 who rarely spoke except in whispers to her carved wooden horse. The carving was small, worn smooth, and she carried it everywhere, a gift from her mother the year before she died. That evening, as Elias stacked wood by the porch, he saw the rider, a woman thin from travel, shoulders tense, wrapped in a simple woven shawl. Her hair was braided in 2 long, dark strands that fell over her shoulders. She did not look broken, but she looked tired, like someone who had walked too long without permission to rest. When she dismounted, her knee nearly buckled. Elias moved without thinking. "Please," she said, voice low, dust dry. "Just one night. I'll work for it." June peeked from behind her father's leg, clutching the wooden horse to her chest. She stared at the woman, not with fear but with recognition. Children know sorrow before adults admit it. Elias looked toward the horizon. No dust trails, no riders in pursuit, just open land. He wasn't a man to turn someone away. "You can stay," he said. One night, inside, the house was warm, lit by the orange glow of a small stove. The woman sat slowly, careful in every movement. When June placed a tin cup of water in her hands, the woman bowed her head in thanks, silent, graceful, controlled. "My name is Nayeli," she said finally. "Of the White Hawk people," Elias nodded. "Elias, and this is June." The girl hid her face again. They did not speak much that night. They didn't need to. The fire did the talking. Outside, the wind brushed the boards of the cabin like distant footsteps. But when Nayeli pulled her shawl aside, Elias noticed a broken leather bracelet at her wrist, the kind worn not for decoration, but for identity, and beneath it, a fresh cut, wrapped in hastily tied cloth, not an accident, not travel-worn, a wound from running. Elias did not ask. He had learned there were questions that break people if spoken too soon, but Nayeli noticed his eyes, and she met them with quiet strength. "If anyone asks," she said, "I'm here because I needed rest." Nothing more. Elias nodded once, a simple agreement, a fragile peace, but outside, far beyond the valley, where the open plains meet dry canyon, a thin plume of dust rose under the hooves of 3 riders searching the darkening land. Nayeli's breathing stilled. Elias did not yet know. But the night had begun to shift. June, half asleep, leaned against her father's arm. Her small wooden horse slipped from her fingers and landed softly on the floor. The fire crackled. The wind carried the scent of mesquite. The land listened. "Truth is to be seen, not chased." Brand whisper. The night was not yet over, and one night would not be enough. "You don't owe us anything," he said softly, but she kept her hands busy anyway. Morning arrived, gentle and pale, without hurry. The desert light came slow, washing the plains in soft gold. A cool breeze carried the scent of juniper, and somewhere far off, a meadowlark sang. Inside the small cabin, Nayeli rose before dawn. Elias found her outside, already at work, sweeping the worn porch with a bundle of dried grass tied at one end. Her movements were quiet, precise, the kind of labor done out of habit, out of survival, not courtesy. "You don't have to do chores to stay," Elias said, leaning against the post. Nayeli did not look up. "I know," she said. "But work keeps the mind steady." Elias understood that more than he expected. June sat on the porch steps, braiding and unbraiding the mane on her small wooden horse. She watched Nayeli with cautious interest, as if waiting for the shape of the woman to settle into something familiar. The land was still, peaceful, but thin, like a page that could tear. After breakfast, Elias saddled his horse to check the east fence line. The rails had been shifting again, June tugged at his sleeve before he rode out. "Daddy," she whispered. "She's sad." Elias looked toward the cabin door, where Nayeli stood still, hands folded, eyes distant. "Yes," he said quietly. "She is." June hugged the carved horse close and nodded once, as if she had already decided something only children can decide, something without complication or fear. She would sit near Nayeli today. Out on the plains, the sun rose higher, the air warmed, grass rustled. Indias rode slow, taking in the land that was both friend and burden. The horizon stretched wide, a reminder of everything a man could hide from, and everything that eventually found him. He saw no riders, no dust clouds, no sign of pursuit. But Elias had learned long ago, danger rarely announces itself early. Back at the ranch, Nayeli and June worked side by side in the garden plot behind the cabin. The soil there was stubborn, rocky dry, unwilling. But June showed Nayeli the small patch where something green had begun to take root. "Mom planted those," June said, pointing to the sprouting leaves. Before she went away, Nayeli knelt, touching the soil gently, as though afraid to disturb something sacred. "She tended this place with care," she said softly. June nodded. "I miss her. But sometimes it feels like she's still here." Nayeli did not speak, but her breath trembled, and June saw it, without thinking. The girl took the small wooden horse and held it out. "You can hold it," she whispered. "If you want." Nayeli stared a moment, then accepted it with both hands, reverent. The surface was smooth from love, from memory, from grief. She closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek, not loud, not broken, just true. When Elias returned, he found them sitting together beneath the cottonwood tree, June leaning against Nayeli's side, Nayeli's hand resting lightly on the wooden horse. The sight slowed him, softened him, confused him. He knew then something had shifted, not just in his home, but in the air itself. That evening, as the light faded, Elias finally asked the question he had avoided. "Nayeli, what is it you're running from?" Silence settled thick. Nayeli turned her wrist, revealing the broken bracelet again, the leather strap marked with a carved hawk symbol. "My people did not wish for me to leave," she said. "But those who hunt me now, they are not my people anymore." The wind quieted, the horizon darkened, somewhere just beyond sight. A distant echo of hooves trembled in the earth. The peace of the day had been real, but peace does not mean safety. Not yet. "Not all who follow mean harm," she said, but her hands trembled all the same. Night returned with a quiet heaviness. The cabin lantern flickered, filling the small room with soft amber light. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the open dark. The land felt wide, watchful. Elias sat at the table carving a new horseshoe peg with his pocket knife. Wood shavings curled at his feet. He did not look at Nayeli, but his attention was fixed on her presence, the way one watches a storm cloud in the distance. Nayeli sat near the fire, turning the broken hawk bracelet between her fingers. The leather strap, frayed and torn, held a carved bone bead shaped like a bird mid-flight. The carving was beautiful, careful, personal, but now it looked like a memory that hurt to touch. June sat close beside her, head leaning lightly against Nayeli's arm. "Half asleep." "Tell me," Elias said at last, his voice low. "Not everything. Just what you need to say." Nayeli did not answer right away. She let the silence breathe. Her chest rose and fell slowly, like someone weighing whether truth would free her or break her. "I was promised to a man," she began, "a leader among my tribe. Not for love, for alliance, strength. He was respected, but his heart was cruel." She paused, eyes fixed on the fire. "When my husband died," Elias whispered, surprising himself, "people tried to tell me which way to grieve, what to feel, how to move on. But grief doesn't obey rules." Nayeli looked at him then, really looked. "Yes," she said softly. "You understand." June stirred but did not wake. Nayeli continued, "He came for me. The man who was meant to claim me. I refused. I chose my own path." Her voice tightened. He was not a man who liked to be refused. Elias' grip on the carving knife stilled. "So I left," Nayeli said. "I took only what I needed. But one among my people believes I must be brought back, by force, if necessary. And he rides with others, 3 men, maybe more." Elias felt the weight of it settle like dust along his skin. "How close are they?" he asked. Nayeli closed her eyes for a moment, listening, not to sound, but to memory. 2 days, she said. "Perhaps 1, Elias' jaw tightened. The room felt smaller, but June, still resting against Nayeli, breathed softly, peacefully, as if the storm had no place in her dreams. Nayeli brushed the girl's hair back gently. "She reminds me," she whispered, "that not everything is taken. Some things are still given." Elias swallowed hard against something he didn't have a name for. The fire crackled. The wind scraped dry grass against the cabin walls. The night listened, patient and endless. Elias spoke quietly, as if speaking to the flames themselves. "You can stay another night," he said. "Whatever comes, we will face it when it arrives." Nayeli stared into the fire. The flicker reflected in her dark eyes. "You would risk your home, your child, for a stranger?" Elias shook his head. "Not a stranger anymore." There were no more words, just the soft sound of June's breathing, the warm sigh of the fire. The quiet, fragile thread of something like trust stretched across the night. Outside, unseen in the vast dark, the earth hummed faintly with hoofbeats, still distant, but coming. Nayeli tightened her grip on the broken bracelet. The hawk carved into it seemed to watch the darkness with sharp, waiting eyes. The peace of the day had been real, the danger of tomorrow was closer, and the land, the wide, relentless land, did not choose sides. "You can turn her over and keep your peace," the stranger said, but peace was never that simple. The next morning rose sharp and windless. The sky was pale, the horizon washed in cold light. Elias woke early, more from unease than habit. He stepped out onto the porch and saw the land stretched quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before arrival. He saddled his horse, rode out a short mile to the ridge overlooking the valley. The earth was dry, cracked with last summer's heat. A hawk circled overhead, silent and steady. Then he saw it, a dust plume, faint but certain. 4 riders, maybe 5, moving slow, reaching. They were not searching anymore, they were coming. Elias's breath steadied. He rode back. Nayeli was already outside, her shawl drawn tight. She had known before words were needed. "Some knowledge comes through the earth, the air, the bones that remember." "How long?" she asked. "By sundown," Elias answered. June stood in the doorway, clutching her wooden horse, eyes wide but not afraid. Not yet. Nayeli knelt before her. "Little one," she said gently, "no matter what happens, your father will keep you safe." June looked between them, the woman who had become something like refuge, and the father who had faced too much loss to surrender easily. "You're not going back with them," June whispered, as if declaring something the world needed to hear. Nayeli's throat tightened. "No," she said, "I am not." Inside, Elias prepared, not for a fight but for a stand. He checked the hinges on the cabin door, moved June's bed into the corner farthest from windows, set a kettle on the stove to keep the air warm. These were not the motions of a gunslinger, they were the motions of a father. But when the dust finally reached the ranch boundary, it arrived with voices. 3 riders broke from the horizon. Their horses were tired, their clothing worn with long travel. The man in front sat tall, braided hair falling past his shoulders, a hawk emblem stitched into the leather at his chest, the same symbol carved into Nayeli's broken bracelet. He did not shout. He called out in a calm voice that carried across the yard. "Elias Grant," he said. "We mean no trouble, unless you make it." Elias stepped forward, rifle resting but not raised. "She's not property," he answered. "If she chooses to stay, she stays." The leader's face did not change, but something cold flickered behind his calm. She was promised, he replied. The old way holds. You know this. Elias didn't look away. The old way also says a person's spirit is their own. A quiet moment stretched, long enough for the wind to move through the dry grass. One of the riders shifted, restless. The leader raised his hand. Stillness returned. We will return at dawn, he said. If she walks to us by her own feet, there will be no bloodshed. And if she doesn't? Elias asked. The leader's answer was a simple truth. Then the land will remember what happened here. They rode off, not far, just to the tree line, watching, waiting. Nayeli stood in the doorway, the bracelet held in her hand. Her jaw was steady. Her eyes were not. They expect me to choose, she said. You already did, Elias replied. But choices have cost. That evening, the house felt smaller. The walls seemed to hold their breaths. June slept between them, clutching the wooden horse like it could keep the world still. Nayeli sat awake, staring at the bracelet. I will not let him take your home, she whispered. Elias shook his head. You don't owe us your freedom to protect this place. Nayeli's voice was a quiet ember. Freedom is not something I trade. It is something I keep. Outside, the riders' campfire glowed in the dark. The desert watched, ancient, patient, without mercy. Tomorrow would not be simple. At dawn we stand, Elias said, and the still air carried the weight of it. The night passed in slow breaths. The cabin felt like a heartbeat, warm, fragile, human. Outside, the firelight from the riders flickered through the cottonwoods, shifting like watchful eyes. Elias didn't sleep. He sat at the table, sharpening a fence knife that was far too small to matter. But it kept his hands steady, and his thoughts from slipping. Nayeli sat across from him, wrapped in her shawl. The bracelet lay between them on the table, its frayed leather edges catching the lamplight. It was more than a symbol. It was a history of belonging and betrayal. They believe they're doing right, Nayeli said quietly. Some of them. Not all men who follow orders do so with cruelty. Some simply do not know another path. Elias looked up. But you know your path now, Nayeli nodded. Yes, I do. June slept against the far wall, the wooden horse tucked under her chin like a small guardian. When the first pale silver of dawn crept across the floorboards, the world felt slow and held, like the earth itself was waiting to see what choice would be. Nayeli stepped outside first. The air was cold, still. Even the birds seemed to. Wait, the riders approached at a walking pace, not rushing, not threatening, just arriving. Their horses' hooves pressed softly against the frost-hardened dirt. The leader sat tall, his expression unreadable in the early light. Nayeli stepped forward beside Elias. No one spoke at first. Then the leader dismounted, hands open, empty of weapons. Nayeli, he said. Her name was not harsh. It was heavy, as though it carried years of expectation. Come home. The council will hear your reasons. You will not be harmed. Nayeli did not move. I have given my reasons, she said. I was not listened to. One of the riders shifted, guilt flickering across his features, truth heard, but unspoken. The leader's jaw tightened. If you stay, you break the old binding. You break trust. You break tradition. Nayeli's voice did not waver. Tradition is not meant to be a cage. The leader stepped closer, slow, respectful, trying to reach her in a language older than words. You were promised. I was promised without my voice, Nayeli answered. And a promise that silences a woman is no promise at all. The wind caught that sentence and carried it across the land. Something shifted. The oldest rider, the one with grey at his temples, looked down. His shoulders sagged as though he had waited years for someone to say what she had just said. The leader exhaled. His power was not broken, but the ground beneath it had changed. He looked at Elias then, not as a challenger, not as an enemy, but as a man. You would stand for her. Elias nodded once. I will stand with her. June stepped outside, small but unwavering. Wooden horse in hand. She stays, the child said. The world paused, and the leader, slowly, deliberately placed his hand over his chest in a gesture of old respect. A voice spoken with courage, he said. It cannot be taken back. He turned to his riders. We return, he said. There is no chase here anymore. They left the way they came, without threat, without shame, only silence, a silence that felt like release. Nayeli stood shaking, not from fear, but from the weight being lifted. Elias steadied her without touching her. June took Nayeli's hand instead. The sun rose, and the land breathed. The bracelet, still broken, still frayed, glowed softly in the morning light. Not a chain anymore, a memory, a choice. Sometimes a home is not a place, she said, but the people who let you breathe inside it. The day after the riders left, the land felt different. The air carried no tension, no waiting. The grass moved softly under the morning breeze, and a light warmth settled over the ranch like a quiet blessing. Elias repaired a section of fence near the corral. His hammer struck the posts in calm, steady rhythm, not hurried, not defensive. Just work, honest work, the kind that meant life was continuing. Nayeli stood at the porch watching him. For the first time since arriving, her shoulders were not tight, not ready to run. The horizon no longer looked like something she had to measure for danger. It simply looked like distance. June chased a chicken across the yard, laughing. The small, high laugh of a child whose world has not yet learned to break itself. She held her wooden horse in her free hand as she ran, as though the two of them, horse and girl, were in on the joke together. The bracelet lay near Nayeli on the porch railing. The leather was still torn, the hawk carving still worn from years of touch. But there was no urgency in the way she held it. Elias approached, wiping sweat from his brow. You don't have to decide where you go next, he said, careful with his words. Not today, not tomorrow. Nayeli looked down at the land, the cabin, the small corral, the garden patch where young green sprouts pushed up stubbornly through rocky soil. This place has grief, she said softly. Yes, Elias answered, but it also has room, she continued. Room for quiet. Elias didn't respond, but he stood a little closer. June came bounding up the steps and climbed into Nayeli's lap without asking permission, something she had never done before. She held up the wooden horse. Mom said this horse always knows its way back home, June said. Nayeli's hand closed gently over the carving. Then it knows something I am still learning, she whispered. They spent the afternoon side by side. Elias and Nayeli repairing garden fencing, June gathering smooth stones to line the edge of the path. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable. When evening came, they sat outside beneath the cottonwood tree. The sky melted from gold to rose to deep blue, the stars rising slow and patient. A fire crackled near their feet, warm and steady. Nayeli held the bracelet in her hands. I could mend this, she said. Tie the leather again. Make it whole. You could, Elias replied. She shook her head gently. But it is better like this. Broken but chosen. Not worn because it was given, but because I keep it by my own will. Elias understood. Some things are stronger when you don't try to return them to what they were, only to what they mean now. June leaned against them, half asleep, warm and safe. The night settled quiet around them. The kind of quiet that comes after being tested, after the storm has passed and left only the sound of breathing and the soft rustle of leaves. Nayeli looked up at the stars. I don't know how long I will stay, she said. But I know I am no longer running. Elias nodded. Then stay as long as you're meant to. No promise, no claim, just space, just peace. The wooden horse rested in June's lap. The broken bracelet rested in Nayeli's palm, and the land, vast and old, held them without judgment. A home is sometimes just a place where no one asks you to be less than you are, and here, that was finally true.